Let's take a look at what's going on at the Virginia gubernatorial race. So, those of you who have been watching over the past few days may have known that I covered this, a little bit of it, last week, because as of today, I believe, November the 2nd, on Tuesday, is when the votes are going to be cast for who is going to end up as the next governor of Virginia. And the race is currently down to the two primary candidates, who are Glenn Youngkin running for the Republican Party and Terry McAuliffe running for the Democratic Party. Terry McAuliffe has actually been the Democratic governor of Virginia previously. I don't know what led to him not being the governor from 2017, 2018 onwards, but he is running for it again, and they have had Democratic governance in that time with a different governor whose name eludes me at the moment. And as far as everyone can tell, the election seems to be sort of taking the temperature of the nation on the popularity of Joe Biden's presidency as it stands at the moment. So here we can see on NBC News that the Biden's approval rating is down again. So it's not boding well for people liking the Democrats at the moment. Yes! A majority of Americans now disapprove of President Joe Biden's performances, while half give him low marks for competence and uniting the country, according to results from the latest national NBC News poll. What's more, the survey finds that 7 in 10 adults, including almost half of Democrats, believe the nation is heading in the wrong direction, as well as nearly 60% who view Biden's stewardship of the economy negatively just 9 months into his presidency. And you can see there that his approval rating has been steadily dropping very consistently, and it's not even just that his approval rating has been dropping, it's that his disapproval rate has been growing. It's not that there are more people who are like, I don't really care that much. It's more people who are not going, no, I really dislike him
We
now.
outright hate what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you've got record inflation, infrastructure bills that are skyrocketing into the cost of trillions of dollars, and barely anybody knows really what's in them because they're like 1,500 pages long. And then with that comes ever expanding encroachment of the government into your personal life. It's not really that surprising to me that people aren't that happy
in addition
with his
to the
performance.
fact that he made one of the worst geopolitical decisions any leader of the free world has made.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And here's just a reminder of what we covered last week regarding this. I don't know if you've seen this image, Tom.
I had the displeasure of...
Yeah, so for context of this, what this is a book called Genderqueer that was being stocked in school libraries in Virginian public schools that could be accessed by children as young as 11. It was the memoir of the writer, whose name I can't remember. She is, of course, a queer person who decided that a comic book about her own sexual activities is what she wants to release, and then the schools decided this is perfect for our education. I don't know what this is going to do in terms of providing educational value for the students, but hey-ho. And here's Terry McAuliffe commenting on it when Glenn Youngkin was rightfully calling them out for feeding this sort of things to children. Glenn is spending the final days of his campaign focusing on banning award-winning books from our schools and silencing the voices of black authors. You probably can't see it in this, but he has used, of course, capital B black, because they are their own voter block at this point. It's more than just an immutable characteristic. It's part of your indelible identity now. So he's trying to downplay exactly what the books are. There is another book called Beloved, which is a bit more contentious on whether or not parents should let their kids read it or not. But I think we can all agree that this is not appropriate.
I think we can all agree that this is just as damaging for black children as it is for anyone else's children. So the point doesn't stand.
And back in 2017, McAuliffe himself vetoed a bill that would allow parents of students to be able to have a say in what kind of educational materials, including books, that their kids can get a hold on. So he does not want you to be able to say no to this sort of stuff. And there's also the question, it's not banning the book. If you just don't stock it in schools, people can still go out and buy it in their day-to-day life if you want to. But of course, then there's the question, if this wasn't being fed to impressionable school children, would anybody actually read this? And there are other issues that we can find with Democrats educating your children in the state. So if we move along, John. So we can see here, if you scroll down a little bit, James Lindsay on Twitter had gotten into a little bit of an altercation with, verbal altercation with someone. Scroll down a little bit further for me so we can see, Judd Legham here had been asking James for some kind of evidence that they were teaching critical race theory in K through 12 schools. And if you scroll up, James pointed out this document that he found from the, let me just see here, the Virginia Department of Education, which talks about racist ideas, which cites Ibram X. Kendi, who I covered on the podcast yesterday, who claims not to be a critical race theorist, but is heavily influenced by critical race theory. And you can see there in the red circle, he has circled it up, that they have a definition of white supremacy, which explicitly states that it is drawing from critical race theory. So, of course, this is exactly what this is the sort of things that people are being taught in these K through 12 schools. And then there's also other influence of critical race theory in not just the way that these kids are being taught, but the choice of their teachers as well. And we've got a clip, if you move along, of him where he says, you've got Christopher F. Rufo, who's great on Twitter, I recommend you follow him, calling out Terry McAuliffe, closing his campaign with the message that there are too many white teachers in Virginia, and he wants to reduce the number of white teachers in order to make everybody feel comfortable. John, if you want to play that clip just so we can all hear it for ourselves.
And I promise you, we've got to diversify our teacher base here in Virginia. 50% of the students in Virginia schools, K-12, 50% are students of color, and yet 80% of the teachers are white. We all know what we have to do in a school to make everybody feel comfortable in school. So let's diversify. So here's what I'm going to do. We'll be the first state in America. If you'll teach for 5 years here in Virginia in a high-demand area, that be geographic or coursework, we will pay room, board, and tuition at any college, any university, any HBCU here in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Or maybe what's good for children is not to make everything an issue about race.
Exactly. And maybe also what's good for children and what will make people more comfortable is not stocking it full of perverted memoirs.
Just a bit.
It really confuses me, but he says there, we know what we need to make people feel comfortable, which is racial parity with the students. For some reason, I would say what's best for people's education is hiring teachers on merit, their ability to teach and to handle a classroom professionally and get kids enthusiastic about learning. And honestly, it doesn't matter what race or ethnicity you are.
And clamping down on teachers who are smuggling in material that is explicitly corruptive.
Well, the thing is, I don't think that was smuggled in. That was being openly displayed at not universities, at schools, for kids to just find and read themselves.
Okay,
so
I didn't know that.
It's very, very strange.
Worse than I thought then.
Terry McAuliffe has some other problems, which is that he seems to keep lying about COVID figures. Now, YouTube, we are trying to stick to the rules here, so we are trying to be as accurate as possible with the figures that we get. So we are just reporting on what we're finding here through the information and through fact checkers, and including the Washington Post, who I'm sure you're fine with. So, hand on heart, we're doing our best here. So Terry McAuliffe, as you can see here through this post on Gab, has falsely claimed that again that today 1,142 children of our sorry, this is written very strangely. Sorry, I wrote it down wrong. 1,142 of our children have been hospitalized with COVID. For the week that ended in October 23, the real figure was 19 children who were in hospital with COVID. Very strange, and they point out what kind of politician lies about children being in the hospital.
Yeah, you don't.
So he is inflating the numbers in some way, according to this. I don't know exactly how. And
some overshoot.
It seems that this is so obvious that even the Washington Post is calling him out on it now. I found this article through US presidential election news because the Washington Post article itself was behind a paywall, but I can go into some of the details here. So it says here, the Washington Post, a liberal paper which has endorsed McAuliffe, finally took notice and scored his COVID lies a whopping 4 Pinocchios. I kind of like that they're scoring it in Pinocchios, but okay. We first became interested in this issue when McAuliffe, in the second and final debate on September 28th, said that there were 8,000 corona cases yesterday in Virginia. He then repeated the statement the next day and a week later on October 7th. But when we checked the records, you had to go back to January to find a single day when a combination of confirmed and probable cases in Virginia got close to 8,000. On September 27th, there were fewer than 2,000 confirmed cases. Repeating numbers that are easily checked is just dumb politics and perhaps lazy campaigning. However, it doesn't look good when you want to be the one in charge of the state's COVID policies, but you appear to be mistaken or lying about the current numbers. So this is so obvious that even the Washington Post, who you would expect to be shilling as hard as possible for McAuliffe, are calling him out for it. And they continue here. And what about McAuliffe's October 7th comment that 1,142 children were in ICU beds? That number seemed totally off kilter. For the week that ended October 2nd, the number of children in hospitals, not necessarily intensive care, was just 35. The McAuliffe campaign said that he simply misspoke. Okay, we moved on. But then he said it again on October 21st. We've just got 1,142. So he has continued to use the same number for some reason. I don't know if he's got the wrong information and just hasn't bothered to fact check it. But he says we've got that amount of children in hospitals, in ICU beds, and that was still wrong. On that day, there were only 334 people of all ages, so that's total, in ICU beds in Virginia, according to the state health department data. So this is also obvious, once again, that the Washington Post are able to call him out on it, with, which is very good of them, to be perfectly honest, more than I would expect. And he is obviously seeming to inflate the numbers for the purpose of scare tactics and scaremongering, so that, because I believe that Youngkin has stated as part of his campaign for the gubernatorial election that he would potentially be pulling back on some of the COVID restrictions in the state, which just seems like a reasonable thing to do for me, because Republicans, strangely enough, care about people's liberties and don't want to lock people down or demonize them for their health choices. So, and then you move on, and there's some even more damning things have been coming to light in regards to the way the Democrats have been playing with the election, which is that in the final few days before the election, a bunch of people here, if you scroll down to that image, showed up in Charlottesville outside of Youngkin's campaign trail, dressed with white shirts, these hats and sunglasses, khakis, with tiki torches, which, for anybody familiar with what happened in Charlottesville back in 2017, is obviously trying to reference back to the fact that, you know, there was the grand showing of people throwing up and throwing Nazi salutes.
These are Putin levels of electioneering now.
I know, this is pretty impressively transparent. But yeah,
almost literally, because it's raining and you can see the shirt underneath.
Yeah, the other thing is they've got a black guy with them. If they were white supremacists, how likely would it be that they've just got one black guy with them? Very strange choice optically, but I don't know necessarily if these were supposed to be like actively trying to perform as legitimate white supremacists, or if it was just an optics thing so that they could be like, hey, remember that this happened? Oh, you don't want to vote for the Republicans because this will happen all over again, and here we are to remind you.
Maybe the whole thing's ironic, but I can't see it would be out of character with the Democrats' strategy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if this was supposed to be some kind of legitimate psyop, these guys are radioactive. They're glowing that bright. But I do think it seems to have just been one of those situations where they were just like, let's remind people of what happened a few years ago. But the problem is that the people who dressed up seem to have gotten caught and called out on their private social media. If you pull this up now, I'm not doing this to dox anybody, and I'm not entirely sure, looking at the images, whether this is the same guy or not. But people seem to have pointed out that the financial director for the Young Virginia Democrats has put his account as private after having been exposed for posing as one of these fake white supremacists. And it doesn't look great that he's gone private on this.
No, it looks somewhat suspicious.
Yeah, and the Young Virginia Democrats are an activist group, so it does seem that it might be the guy, but don't harass these people, folks. It might be a case of mistaken identity, but it is a little bit suspicious. And then a few days later, if we skip along again, the Lincoln Project just came out and outright admitted that they organised this.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so the Anti-Republican Political Action Committee, the Lincoln Project, claimed responsibility on Friday for a stunt which involved activists dressing up as tiki torch-carrying white nationalists in a bid to link the Virginia GOP gubernatorial candidate Glenn Youngkin to racist views. The group of 5 people stood outside Youngkin's campaign bus during an event in Charlottesville, the site of the deadly Unite the Right rally in August 2017. In one of the defining images of that event, rally organizer Jason Kessler led a tiki torch-wielding mob on a march through the grounds of the University of Virginia in an attempt to echo Nazi torchlight parades. Friday's group, which included an African-American man, which everybody's noticed at this point, were wearing white button-down shirts and khakis, the outfit worn by some of the white nationalists who attended the rally. "We're all in for Glenn," members of the group said, according to an NBC 29 reporter. Youngkin himself suggested that his Democratic opponent was behind the demonstration, telling NBC 29, "I think they work for Terry McAuliffe, and I'm sure he sent them. They'll do anything to win. And he's doing anything to win. And so he's paying people to show up and act silly at our rallies." Very perceptive, absolutely true. And the Lincoln Project ultimately claims credit for the outrageous scene in a statement Friday evening. "Today's demonstration was our way of reminding Virginia voters of what happened in Charlottesville 4 years ago. The Republican Party's embrace of those values and Glenn Youngkin's failure to condemn it." I mean, who's asked him to condemn it? Why is this? Obviously, he is a Republican. He does not support people showing up to his rallies and throwing Nazi symbols and Nazi salutes and supporting actual white supremacy, not the critical race theory idea of white supremacy, that is, actual white supremacy.
As an actual contempt for someone's skin colour.
Yeah. Obviously, he does not support those things. Donald Trump did not support those things, but people are still trying to call him out for it. And this just appears to have been, in the end, an epic self-own, and it shows how deceitful and deceptive they are happy to be in their campaign tactics. And do you want this kind of deception running your state? And then just as another reminder, so we've got the real-time polls, as far as I can tell, up here. If you scroll down to the graph, it might make it a bit clearer for people watching. So you can see there the red line, of course, is Youngkin for the Republicans, blue line McAuliffe. For the most part, during the campaigns, it seemed that McAuliffe had a pretty steady lead against him, until you just get to this little bit at the end here, where all of a sudden Youngkin overtakes him. So he's currently leading at 48.5 to 46.8 in the polls. Whether that'll translate to an election win, we don't know necessarily yet. But if you're out in Virginia, get out today and get voting, because you have the chance to change your state from democratic governance, which has had for what, like probably 12 years at this point, I believe, back to Republicans. And honestly, why do you want the Democrats running your state when we've just shown you everything that they're up to?
Whatever your political persuasion, why would you want a compulsive liar, an electioneerer?
Yes, who will push race baiting and perversion on your children in the schools and will happily do so. Yeah. So, yeah, get out and let your voices be heard.
Thanks for watching this clip from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. We broadcast live on lotuseaters.com at 1 PM UK time every weekday. And we also have loads more content that we don't put on YouTube, such as the memes and video comments from our community. Every week we also have new episodes of our regular series, Contemplations and Epochs. In Contemplations, Josh explores interesting and diverse topics, such as the science behind the need for fathers in the home, or why people believe in ghosts and the paranormal. In Epochs, Bo and I go on, often at length, about various events and periods in history that are particularly fascinating. We've just finished a 5-part mini-series on the 100 Years' War, which I particularly enjoyed right up until the end of it when, spoiler alert, the French won. Alongside our excellent team of in-house writers, we also commission articles from outside contributors, and silver and gold tier subscribers have access to an audio recording of each premium article, so you don't have to read it yourself. We interview various contemporary thinkers and entertainers, as well as host the recordings of our live events. We also have a series of premium video content on the site, which we think is particularly worthwhile, or we simply can't put on YouTube because their editorial policies prohibit reasonable discussion on the subject. Personally, I think the deep dives we've been doing into critical theory and critical race theory are most important, as we reveal the origins of intersectionality and the plan that the radical left has for our societies. We are funded almost exclusively by our subscribers, so if you'd like to join us in the work we're doing, head over to lotuseaters.com and we'll see you there.